Enter Maury Terry. Changes to Cecilia's storyline. Reporter Dispatch, July 19, 1979. Excerpts. It now appears that unless the recollections of the witnesses in Brooklyn are wrong, Berkowitz was not alone at the scene, lied in a critical area of his confession, and indeed was probably not the person who gunned down Violante and Miss Moskowitz. One of those witnesses, Cecilia Davis, is a 51-year-old widow who lives alone with her white Spitz Snowball in a garden apartment on Brooklyn's Bay 17th Street. Mrs. Davis told the police not only about the ticket Berkowitz had received for parking too close to a fire hydrant, but also of Berkowitz's car leaving the scene before the shooting. Mrs. Davis says she told homicide detective Joseph Strano 2 days after the attack that Berkowitz's Ford had been driven off before the shots were fired, in apparent pursuit of the police car that had issued the ticket. Strano confirms hearing the story, but says he didn't learn of it until after Berkowitz's arrest, when Mrs. Davis told it to an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn. It is known, however, that the police, checking the ticket, originally sought Berkowitz as a possible witness to the Moskowitz killing, not a potential suspect. His car's departure before the shooting would provide a plausible explanation for this police action. In any event, the information has never been made public by the police. Mrs. Davis says she next disclosed the story to the Brooklyn District Attorney in May 1978, 9 months after Berkowitz had been arrested. She had not been interviewed by the prosecution before then. I always thought the police told the district attorney about it, she says, but he, the assistant district attorney, told me he never heard it until I told him. Stephen T. Wax, a former assistant district attorney in Brooklyn and now the public defender in Broome County, says that he cannot recall the Davis conversation, but that his notes of a May 1978 meeting with her indicate he was told of Berkowitz's driving away. Besides contradicting Berkowitz's account, Mrs. Davis' description of Berkowitz on Bay 17th Street moments before the shooting differs substantially with the one supplied by Zeno, who says he watched the killer before, during, and after the attack 2 blocks away on Shore Parkway. Interesting note, it appears that Strano and Mrs. Davis spent quite a number of hours together on at least 2 to 3 occasions. They went shopping together, and it was noted that Strano knew her. So I find it very curious that he hadn't heard of that part of the story until after Cecilia told Stephen Wax, the Brooklyn DA, 9 months later, May 1978. Let's hear more from Maury Terry from The Ultimate Evil. In the early morning hours, Mrs. Cecilia Davis was awakened by loud knocking on her door. "We're from the police," the voice behind it said, according to Mrs. Davis. Releasing the latch, she was greeted by Daily News reporter William Federici and a photographer. Federici's name had appeared on the byline of the Make Mrs. Davis a Target story that was on the newsstands at the moment. Federici said Mrs. Davis had had a longtime friend of Joseph Strano, the detective from 10th Homicide, who took down her account of the night of the shooting and later accompanied her on the shopping trip during which they unsuccessfully searched for a jacket identical to the one Berkowitz had worn. Now having obtained Mrs. Davis's name and address from some source or other, Federici was inside the comfortable, beautifully furnished Bay 17th Street apartment ready to hear the prized confidential witness's own first personal story. Hesitant at first, but reassured since the killer was now arrested, Mrs. Davis agreed to pose her photos with her dog and to accompany Federici to the offices of the Daily News in Manhattan. Mrs. Davis picks up the account. I went with him. They told me Strano said it was all right to talk to them, so I told them what happened that night. I interrupted. Did you tell them about Berkowitz's car moving, leaving the neighborhood, blowing the horn and all that? Yes, she replied. I told Federici all about it. Strano already knew about the car. Strano knew, and then I told Federici about it. Before the arrest, the significance of the cars leaving the area was minimal. The action occurred 15 minutes before the shootings, and no one knew the owner of the Nagid auto would turn out to be Berkowitz, the alleged killer. But the Galaxie's departure now took on a new and very damaging significance. Federici took down what I told him, and it was typed out. I looked at it, and it was just as it had happened. Mrs. Davis continued, and then Strano came in. According to Mrs. Davis, Detective Strano appeared at the Daily News, read the draft of her first-person story, and then suggested Mrs. Davis might be hungry. She then accompanied a female reporter downstairs for something to eat, she said. When we came back up, the part about Berkowitz taking off the ticket and blowing the horn and all was taken out. The next day, Friday, August 12th, Mrs. Davis's story, under her byline no less, appeared on page 2 of the news. There was no reference to her earlier sighting or the Galaxie's pre-shooting maneuvers, which of course occurred at the time Berkowitz claimed he'd been stalking his victims 2 blocks away. Strano also knew from his own DD5 report that Mrs. Davis had barely entered her apartment when the shots rang out. He'd written that she heard the gunfire while unleashing the dog. If someone, as I later did, thought to measure distances and check time factors, serious questions would also arise. In fact, in a special edition of the news published the morning after the arrest, a detective was quoted as saying she was standing on her stoop, unleashing her dog when she heard the shots and the squeal of the horn. So basically, we have Maury here saying that Strano put the kibosh on that portion of the story where the car drove away. We also have another account that Mrs. Davis heard the shots when she was still outside on her stoop. Please share your thoughts on the changes in Cecilia's storyline.